Hi, it's me, Vicki Marie. So I hope you find me on here because I couldn't get on the other stream, the one that I'd planned. So I'm just going to hang on. I know there were 5 of you waiting, and I couldn't get on that stream. So I have to wait for you to come over here and find me on here. Let's see. Somebody's arrived. Somebody's arrived. Yeah, I tried to get on the stream that I'd planned, that I'd scheduled, and I couldn't get on it. Hi, Chumba. Hi. Yeah, so I don't know why the other one wouldn't work, but there were 5 people waiting on the other one, and I need to try and I don't know how I can tell them that I've come over here. I suppose they'll get a notification, will they? Oh, there they are. So people have arrived. Hi, Rachel. Yeah, trying to get on the other stream, the one that I'd scheduled. And it wouldn't do it, and I couldn't work out how to do it. So I just set up a totally new stream and just came on here instead. So sorry about that. I hope you'll all find your way here in the end. Sorry. Technical things, not my thing, I'm afraid. I don't know if it'll ever be my thing, really. But I'm trying. I'm better than I was. So how are we all? Are we all okay? Hope you're all well. Hi, Mia. Oh, good. People are finding their way here. That's good. Because, yeah, God knows why I couldn't get on that other thing. But there was a few other people waiting. But I hope they will find their way here, hopefully. Hopefully they will. Okay, so while we're waiting for people to find me, because I like to make it difficult for people, let me go through my housekeeping, get that out of the way. So I know a lot of you know already, but this will go out as a video and some people won't have seen it before. So as you know, my book, my book's available if you want to know. And gosh, it's funny on here. It comes up the wrong way around, doesn't it? On here, but it doesn't normally do that, does it? Anyway, never mind. So yeah, I've got my book, Confessions of a Spanish Teacher, or if you want to learn Spanish, my books, but all the links are in the be in the description box anyway, and they're all available on Amazon. Vicki with an I. What the other things I have to tell you about? Yeah, also if you want to support my channel, the best way of supporting my channel is just by pressing like on the video. That's a big thing. Subscribing, that's another free way you can really help me out. And then some of you have joined as members, so there's memberships which are $1.99 a month, and you can cancel them at any time. And also that I think there's a buy me a coffee link, and something that I don't know anything about, but people have actually sent me them, so some people know about them. Super stickers and super thanks and super chat. Okay, but as I said, best way you can help my channel is really just by watching the videos, liking the videos, and subscribing if you're not already subscribed. Hi, Rachel. Yeah, well, it was scheduled. It was scheduled, but the should have gone out sometime this morning saying about the live tonight. But the trouble is the link, when I went in on the link that I'd sent out to everybody, oh gosh, it's thundering here. We've got a storm coming. So you might hear a bit of thunder and lightning. Yeah, when I tried to go in on the link, I just couldn't get in on it. So I had to create a new link. So yeah, sorry, it'll feel like short notice, but it was supposed to be organised. But anyway, never mind. It's more fun, isn't it, when it's spontaneous? Okay, so of course tonight, Serial Killer Sunday, what I am really here to talk about is Peter Tobin. For those of you who live in the UK, you've probably heard of him, unless you're quite young, maybe, because he actually died last year, Peter. I think it was last year. Yeah, 2022. He actually did die last year, and it's like good riddance, bad rubbish to him, because obviously all killers are horrible, but he's a really, really nasty piece of work, Peter Tobin. I mean, it was actually quite upsetting, sort of researching him, because he's just so nasty. But anyway, you'll see that real nasty piece of work. But anyway, he's not with us anymore, thank God. Hopefully he's burning in hell, or he's met his maker and he's paying for the horrible things he did. Let's hope so. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about him. Obviously I'm going to be talking about him, but I'll be talking about his victims as well. And unfortunately, there's many more prospective victims. Peter Tobin, he was only actually convicted of killing 3 girls, 3 women, but he apparently boasted to a prison psychologist when he was in prison that he'd actually killed 48 women. And I think it's perfectly possible that he'd killed all those women, because, well, you'll see. When I tell you the story, you'll see. But before I started, I just wanted to talk about all this with Holly and Phil that's going on today. And I've been sort of researching that a lot, because I mean, I've never been interested in daytime TV, but I never really liked definitely Philip, and not really Holly that much, to be honest, because I just felt this falseness about them. But since I've started really researching it today, I mean, it's so interesting, because there's links going through there, even to the Madeleine McCann case, etc. There's so many, what is one of those things that you start watching one video and it leads to another, and you find out all this information. Very, very interesting. That I think it's just like, really, I mean, we don't know. We shouldn't accuse him of actually loving children, because we don't know yet that the boyfriend he had, that he was under 16. We'll see what comes out. There's a lot more to come out. There's a lot of distancing going on from him, so nobody wants to know him now. But to me, it just reminds me of the Jimmy Savile thing, that once it started, it was like a roller coaster, if you like. It was like no, not a roller coaster. That's not the right word. It was like a big ball rolling down a hill and gathering moss. The Jimmy Savile thing, it started, and then all these other things came out, things that people had known for years and they'd been too scared to talk about, or they tried to talk about it, but the police weren't interested, and all these connections with politicians and royalty, and this is feels like this is going to be exactly the same, to be honest, to me. So sorry, I'm just looking. There's this big storm going on outside. So there's more to come on that story. So and it's the lying, and to me it's endemic of just a bigger general culture of lying that I hate, because I just don't like false people, and I don't like being lied to. And it's that thing of treating the public like idiots, isn't it? And not treating them like, it's like just really not caring about the very people, really, that are putting bread on your table. And you don't care about them. You don't care about lying to them. You just think they're fools, and they believe anything you say. And, I think generally what's going to come out, or seems to be coming out now, is that he's not a very nice person. Chumba. So you live near to the chapel where he killed Angelika Kluk, not Philip Schofield, where Peter Tobin. Yeah, Peter Tobin. Let's go. Anyway, so I just wanted to tell you about that there'll be more videos coming out about this, about Philip Schofield, just because of the fact now I found this connection to the Madeleine McCann case, and so there'll be lots of things coming out about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is later on tonight there will be a video coming out about Emma White. Just I'm doing these in the lead up now to the inquest, and there's no other information coming out. but I'm doing this back to basics series of videos, just going over some of the things, just to remind us, because it's been so long since we've heard from anyone in that case, that I think, it's easy to sort of forget why you had suspicions in the first place or how it felt at the time. So Gloria's saying, Phil is nothing like Jimmy Savile. No, none of us are perfect. I didn't mean necessarily that Phil is like Jimmy Savile. I meant this, the way it's like a snowball, that one thing comes out and then another thing comes out and then another thing comes out. That's what I meant. I mean, I'm not saying he's like Jimmy Savile at all. I meant the situation and the things coming out bit by bit. So maybe I didn't phrase that right. I think it's like something's been set in motion and lots of other things are going to come out for whatever. I do think other things are going to come out. I do think that. But we'll see. We don't know. I don't feel for him if he has done anything like to do with loving children. I don't feel for him. But I feel for him in a way. I feel for his family, feel for his mum, his wife, his children. But anyway, that's for another video, isn't it? Let's get back to Peter Tobin. Oh dear. A lot of people do sort of see this, but we don't know, because he's not been charged with anything. We've got to be aware of that. He insisted. This is Philip Schofield now. I'm talking about, not Peter Tobin. He did insist that he'd got involved in this relationship with a much younger boy, and he is a lot younger. I mean, a lot, not just 10 years younger, or even 20 years, but a lot younger. But there you go, as long as he's legal age. So he has admitted to that. The thing that people are thinking about now is, does it go, is there more to it? And that's what I think we've got to see what happens as time goes on. So back to Peter Tobin. So Peter Tobin was Scottish. He was born in Johnston, which I believe is near Edinburgh, is it? Maybe Chumber will be able to tell me that, because was it who was saying that they lived nearby? I think it was Chumber. He was born on August the 27th in 1946 in Johnston. And he was one of this boomer generation that they talk about, after the war. Sorry, excuse me. And he was one of 8 children. Gosh, that was the times when people used to have really big families, didn't they? He was a Catholic, of course, so it may be that, in those times, contraception was frowned upon for a lot of Catholic families. So, I mean, that's a massive family, one of 8, isn't it? Imagine, my God, I only had one. That was difficult, But, people did used to have big families. And I think especially after the war, this boomer generation, it was like repopulation as well, in a way, wasn't it? Because, of course, we'd lost so many people during the war. And it was, a celebration time after the war. But anyway, he was one of 8 children. Now, from the age of 7, he was in reform school. These reform schools, we used to call them, Johnston is near Paisley. Okay. Yeah, we used to call them Borstals, didn't we? I don't know what they call them now, to be honest. I just don't know. But it would be Borstal or reform school. And at 7 years old, he was put in reform school. So, I think for that to happen at that age, he must have been difficult, mustn't he? Must have been a difficult child. He was a very brutal man. I know, it seems a funny thing to say about killers, but he was particularly brutal, and you'll see and I must give you a bit of a warning, really, because some of the things I'm going to tell you about him are not very nice. So if you are especially sensitive, it's perhaps better. I'll try and warn you before I say it. But anyway, in the end, he was given a whole life tariff eventually. And you'll see why it was eventually, wasn't initially, because he was tried for 3 murders, but separately. So he started off with a smaller sentence. But you know what? Those girls, they should never have died, because again, when I tell you this story, he's one of those cases. Happens so often, doesn't it, when people are put in prison and then released, and then they go off to do something else terrible. And this is what he did. Anyway, so from 7 years old, he was in a reform school. He moved around a lot. This is how he got away with it for as long as he did, I think. He was a very, he was transient, you know. If he thought he was under suspicion in one area, he just moved to a completely different area. He would change his name, he would change his address. So he was quite clever in that way, you know, and that's why I think he's escaped sort of finally being locked up for life for so long. So he was born in Johnston, apparently, Johnston, and he moved to Brighton right. Let me tell you about his marriage, because what he did, he met a young girl, a very young girl. I've watched her interview on YouTube. You can see her, and she's not a young girl now, obviously, but when she met him, she was a very young girl. He was married 3 times, so he's quite popular with women. All his wives said that in the beginning, he was so nice, so kind, charming. He was good looking. He dressed smartly. He knew how to be around women. He knew how to charm women. And this, his first wife, oh my gosh, you know, she said he was in the beginning. It was fantastic. She couldn't believe her luck. You know, she just could not believe that she'd met this lovely man, and everything was so nice, etc. And they started courting, as we used to say, isn't it? Like, you know, started going out together. Now, she said my mum didn't like him from the first day she met him. She said, I turned around and saw my mum's face and I knew she didn't like him. And she said to me, you know, there's something wrong with this guy. But bearing in mind, the girl, his wife, was only 17 years old. So she was in love, you know, where it's like when you're 17, you're not going to listen to what your mum tells you about somebody. So she started going out with him, and she said we had fantastic days out. He liked to drive out in the car, and they drive off places, have picnics. It was all romantic. He was the perfect gentleman. And it all changed. One day he invited her to go round to his flat. And because before that, they'd always either met outside, you know, going for a drive around or whatever, or he'd come round to her house. And she didn't really know what his life was and how his life was. And one day said to her, oh, do you want to come round to my flat? And she was over the moon. She said we had a fantastic day. We were just chatting. You know, it was lovely. It was great. But she used to have to be home by 10 o'clock. Because she lived at her mum's, and her mum, that was like her curfew, that she had to be home at 10 o'clock. So as it was coming up to 10 o'clock, she started to say to him, look, I'm going to have to go in a minute. And he had brought her there, so she was needing him to take her home. And at first he just said, oh, okay, won't be long. And then in the end, when she finally stood up and said, look, I've really got to go because my mum's going to be angry if I don't get home in time, he produced a knife, locked the door, and he kept her prisoner then for a long time. He kept her prisoner for months, and she couldn't contact anybody. Her mum, apparently, which seems, but I think because she'd already fallen out a little bit with her mum about this guy, and mum just presumed, you know, that she'd gone to live with him. And it wasn't in the times when we had social media, you know, you'd have your mobile and you'd just send a message like, well, where are you? Why haven't you come home? You know, different times, aren't they? Anyway, kept a prisoner all that time. During that time as well, he bought her a puppy, which he then later decapitated, and just threw it out into the street, the dead dog into the street. Yeah, he did lots of terrible things to her. She finally, let me see if I can find where I've written it. He wanted to move. That's right. Now, he must have done something around this time, because suddenly, so he would lock her in the house in the day. She wasn't allowed out of the house. Sometimes he would lock her in the bathroom all day. And he'd go off to work or whatever he was doing. I don't think he had like what you'd call a proper job. He was involved in lots of different activities, and he would lock her in the house so she couldn't get. And then one day he came and he said, "We're going to see your cousin in Brighton." And she said, "Oh, okay then." And off they went to visit her cousin in Brighton. And she thought, "Oh gosh, this is good. I might get an opportunity, to escape from him." Because the thing is, when you listen to her talking, you think, "Oh, why didn't you just do this? Or why didn't you just do that?" But one, she was absolutely terrified of him. And two, she was just a young girl and she didn't know what to do or where to go. And I'd say didn't have mobiles then and things. And she felt like, God knows what, women who are abused and like domestic violence and those sort of men, that in the end, they just become a shell where they can't really do anything. They're powerless to do anything, even though later you look back and think, "Oh God, it seems obvious, just do this or just do that." But at the time, you just become a shell of yourself. So that's what had happened to her. Anyway, so off they went to her cousin's, and the first thing she said to her cousin, as soon as she got a chance to, was just as they walked into the house, she turned to her cousin and said, "Please get him out, please get him out, and help me, help me." And so she did. She did get away from him, and she got away with him for a short time. But then one day when she was out, he turned up again and he took her off again. She actually went even on to marry him, because he said, "Right, we're going to get married." And she didn't feel like she had any choice in the matter. They got married. And then it all came to a head one night when he, I don't know what triggered it, if something triggered it, but he read, because he did the R word, he violated her many, many times. I never know what I can say on YouTube. They've been, you're frightened to death of saying or doing anything at the moment. They pull you up over everything. They must have like robots going through everything you say, but he violated her, and then afterwards he took a knife and violated her with the knife, and she was never able to have children because of that. Anyway, that did lead to the end of this whole thing, because he took her to the hospital, and in the hospital she managed to say to the nurse that she needed help, and he was arrested. And that was the end of that marriage. She went on to divorce him, but she could never have children. But he went on to marry 2 more times. So as I say, he obviously had this way with women. I mean, he wasn't attractive sort of when he was finally caught, but you can see on the photos of him when he was young. He apparently dressed very nicely. He was an attractive guy, and all 3 of his wives said exactly the same thing, that in the beginning he was just so nice you couldn't fault him in anything, and then he just changed, like he was a definite Jekyll and Hyde character. Okay, so as always, it's where to do the order of everything, because there's so many things to say about him. It's like, where do we go next? Yeah, now what he did sort of in between marriages, he, as I say, he led a transient lifestyle. So in other words, if he did anything wrong and he thought the police were looking for him, he'd just go off to another area. He'd go between Scotland and England and the south of England. He'd go as far away as he possibly could. He'd change his name, etc. After he was with that lady who finally managed to escape from him and divorce him, He married again, but that marriage only lasted 4 years. And his third wife, he was 40 and she was only a teenager. So he was having to look for younger and younger women because, to be honest, older women just won't listen to that shite, will they? So you have to go for the young girls because they're the ones that they're going to sort of believe the crap that you're talking, I suppose, because obviously as you get older, you do get more of a sense for these sort of people. Anyway, his way of avoiding the police, because there was loads of times that the police were looking for him for one thing and another, burglary, not only sort of serious, well, say burglary is a serious crime, but not only violence towards women or murder or whatever, but when they'd be looking for him for fraud or burglary because he was doing all sorts of things. So what he would do, he would go, because he was a Catholic, he would use that and go to churches. So he'd go to a church, a lot of churches, they'll take people in, give them food. He'd volunteer as an odd job man, a handyman. He was handy like that. That's how he ended up going to where he killed Angela Kluk, because that was a way he could disappear into the church. Or sometimes he would admit himself to hospital, like with imaginary illnesses and things, but, just to keep out of the eye of the police or whatever. And he would also stay in homeless persons' hostels and things. And that's where the police think these many other women that they think he's killed, that they can't prove, they haven't found. They think that's where he would have met a lot of his victims, because obviously in these homeless shelters, etc., there's a lot of vulnerable people and a lot of vulnerable young people. So, it's quite difficult to pin down exactly where his movements and who he met and who he may be likely to have killed. Because as I say, he did say to the psychologist in the prison that he had killed 48 women. Now, he's only actually been tried and convicted for 3. So, 48 seems like a lot, doesn't it? But he was operating for a long time. He was 61 before he was caught. So he was operating from, if you think like from 20 even, that's 41 years. So I think it's not outside the bounds of possibility that it might have killed 48, but we'll go into that later about his prospective victims. So in 1991, he moved to Margate to be near his son, because he actually had 3 children, but he had a son and a daughter with his second marriage, I think, and a son with his third marriage, but the daughter died, unfortunately, from the second marriage. Anyway, so while he was down south, up south, whatever, down in the south, in Havant, on the 4th of August, 1993, he was living there in Havant, and 2 14-year-old girls knocked on his door. Now, they actually had come to see the neighbours, but the neighbours weren't in. Now, they knew Peter Tobin because they'd seen him when they'd been round there before. So he offered them to come in and wait while the neighbours came. Now, they just thought he was a nice old man. That's what everyone thought about him. I'm going to tell you later about a girl that escaped from him, and that's what she thought as well. She just thought he was just a nice old guy who was, being nice, but that's how he lured them in, because he didn't seem like that sort of person. So I should say hi because there's some other people coming. So we've got Lynn. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Charlie Angel. Hi, Gary. I hope I haven't. Ruth. Yeah, it's funny. Some of you come on and you've got like a man's name, but you're really a woman. Or sometimes people have got a woman's name, but they're really a man. But anyway, I'll just say whatever comes up on the screen. So these 2 14, the trouble is I get distracted when I go, well, hi, Charlie, I get distracted when I go on the chat things. So 2 young girls, 2 14-year-old girls knocked on his door. he's offered them, come in and while you wait for the neighbours. He then plied them with alcohol and drugs. He assaulted them quite violently. During that time when he did that, his 5-year-old son was there in the house, in the flat or house or whatever it was, his 5-year-old son. And apparently it's only because his 5-year-old son came into the room, maybe he was asleep in the bedroom or whatever, and saw what was going on. That's the only thing that saved those girls' lives, really, because I think he probably would have gone on to kill them. He tried to kill them, because what he did was he called his ex-wife. So these girls are unconscious on the sofa because of the drugs that he's given them. He then called his ex-wife and said he was having a heart attack, and he had to go to the hospital because that was a common thing that he did. Said he was having, anytime he was in any trouble, he pretended he was having a heart attack. And then he left the house, and he left the gas on in the house in the hope that these girls would die from the gas. And off he went to the hospital for his heart attack, which he wasn't having. Anyway, the girls didn't die, they survived. So luckily they could testify against him, and he was arrested 40 days later in Brighton. I don't know how they found him. I think it was to do with his car. But anyway, they did find him. So that was good. But his sentence, the more I do these cases, the more I think, what is wrong with this sentencing? It's rubbish. It's absolutely rubbish. Hi, Maxine. 14 years he got. 14 years for drugging, violating and attempting to kill 2 14-year-old girls. He got 14-year sentence, and he actually only served 10 years, probably got off for good behaviour or whatever. And that's when he changed his name to Pat McLaughlin. So he didn't appear on any, on any of the registers, the offenders' registers. And Angelika Kluk would still be alive if he hadn't been let out so soon, because that's when he went to the chapel that Chumba's talking about there, St. Patrick's Chapel in Glasgow. And he apparently, I saw the interview, see the people that were running that chapel at the time, they were talking about him. He turned up. He said it was like the devil turning up, because it was like one of those nights. It was stormy night. It was thundering, lightning, etc. And he turned up at the door like the devil, and literally he was the devil. But anyway, they took him in because that's what these churches do. Or this particular one, I know not all churches do that, but this one did. They took him in. He was homeless. He said he was homeless. He was hungry, so they gave him something to eat. And, this was something he did regularly. He took advantage of the fact of his Catholic background, and he often took refuge in Catholic churches and Catholic communities. And he envied, he was just like Mr. Ordinary. He was just like, the nice sort of grandpa type guy. And that's how he would have appeared to Angelika Kluk. Now, Angelika Kluk was only 23 years old. She was a student. She's Polish, and she's a student and in Krakow. And she was earning, I don't know why she was in Glasgow earning money, but she was earning money for her studies in Krakow in Poland. And she was helping out, cleaning at the church. That's how he met Angelika Kluk. And he just came over as this sort of granddad type. He probably, she was vulnerable. I suppose she was in Glasgow, maybe on her own without a family, etc. And he was probably put himself over as a bit of a father figure. Anyway, one day, she just disappeared. So she disappeared. she was studying Scandinavian studies, Angelina, and one day she just disappeared. So the last person she was seen with was Peter Tobin. They were in the garage at the church, and oh look, so now this is somebody who let me just tell her, because this is someone who's tried to get on the other stream and now they're worrying if I'm okay. I just need to tell her where we are because she'd be worrying about me. It's one of my subscribers, one of my members. Okay. So just because she sent me a message, oh, are you all right? So she's probably still waiting. I hope there's not other people waiting. Get down. Anyway, so yeah, Angelika Kluk. So she's doing Scandinavian studies. She's at the chapel, helping out, cleaning to just earn a little bit of money for her studies. And she unfortunately meets up with Peter Tobin because that's what he's there doing. And then one day she just disappears. So at first he was still there. Like when the police first got involved, with the disappearance of Angelina, and they were called in, they did search the church, but they didn't find anything the first time. And he was very helpful. It reminds me a bit of that Ian Huntley thing, the caretaker at the school being really helpful and everything. So he was being helpful. And then the next day he disappeared. So he just buggered off. So the police then started to suspect him, obviously, because he's disappeared. And they searched the church again, and unfortunately, they found Angelina. She was concealed in an underground chamber under the floor near the confessional. And the saddest thing of all is that forensic evidence suggested that she may have been still alive when she was put under the floorboards and just left there. Which is just horrible to think about. And it was thought that he maybe planned to move the body later, but when the police all got involved so quickly and everything, he just did a runner. Anyway, guess where they found him? They found him in a hospital in London. He'd admitted himself into hospital under a false name and a fictitious complaint, probably saying he'd had a heart attack again, likely. Then this is what started. This is how the police found out about the other two people two girls that he ended up being charged with, because when he was missing, they put his photo on the TV, to say that they were looking for him. That's when his wives, particularly his first wife that he'd done that terrible thing with the knife to. I don't know much about the other two wives. They haven't, but she's done an interview. But as far as I know, the other two wives, I didn't see any interviews about them. So of course, all these people saw him and said, "Oh God, that's not Pat McLaughlin," because his name supposedly was Pat McLaughlin because he'd changed his name. And everybody sort of saw the photo and said, "Oh no, that's not Pat McLaughlin. That's Peter Tobin." So he was caught and he was sentenced to, again, going back to these sentences. So bearing in mind now, the guy has violated two 14-year-old girls, drugged them, left them for dead, tried to kill them with the gas. He's now murdered this poor Angelina as well and left her under the floorboards in the church, possibly still alive, to just, I don't know. I mean, it just must have been awful for her. And he was given 21 years. So he still wasn't given like a full life sentence. 21 years, and it wasn't a minimum life tariff yet. But so that 21 years, he's probably only going to serve 15 or something for good behaviour or whatever. So I just think these sentences are awful. I really do. Anyway, but this started off the Operation Anagram, they called it, because they realised, the police, they were good, they realised that just because of the character of what he'd done, that it was likely that he had done other things, that this was unlikely to be serial killers don't normally start killing at 61, they've normally, they would have found out about the two 14-year-old girls that he'd almost killed. So, and probably by then his wives, certainly his first wife, would have come forward and said what sort of person he was. So they realised that there was likely to be other people, other girls that he'd done that to. So they started this Operation Anagram, and they sort of, the whole country was involved in it. And they decided that there was a couple of, there's a lot more, but there was two girls that they thought he possibly might, fitted his sort of modus operandi, if you like, that disappeared over these years, and they started looking into them. He didn't give any information, any help. He never helped with anything. He wasn't like one of these confessional killers. Some killers, once they get into prison, they just can't stop talking. Like Ed Kemper, for example, they want to tell you everything about everything they've done. He wasn't like that. He was more of a sort of Levi Bellfield. He's given out some information now, but it's only if there's something in it for him. Peter Tobin was one, he just wouldn't talk at all. He gave no help whatsoever, no empathy, no respect for the victims or the families. He just didn't give a shit, basically. Anyway, so the police went back to search his properties, one property in particular in Margate, because in 1991, Dinah McNichol, who was only 18 years old, she disappeared after hitchhiking from a festival, a music festival. Now, she actually was with a boyfriend when she first got in the car with this guy who the boyfriend said was Scottish. And then, unfortunately, he got out before her and she was left in the car on her own with the guy who, obviously, in the end, it turned out it was Tobin, and she was never seen again. There had been regular cash withdrawals made from her cash point machine. She had some money, her mother had died and left us an inheritance, which she was saving for her education. And there were regular withdrawals being made. So somehow he's got the PIN number out of her, I suppose. And they searched this house. The address of the property is 50 Irvine Drive in Margate. And they searched the house for Dinah McNichol, and they found a body in the garden of the house where he used to live. But it wasn't her. It wasn't Dinah McNichol. So they actually solved, in looking for Dinah, they solved what had happened to Vicki Hamilton, who she was 15 years old, and she was last seen on the 10th of February 1991 waiting for a bus in Scotland. And he had taken her body all the way from Scotland to this house in Margate, and he had, I don't know if it was her or Dinah, but one of them he'd buried under the sand pit, his children's sand pit. He'd put the sand pit in and put the body underneath. He's just a horrible person. Anyway, so for these, when these people were found, these girls were found, the defence offered no evidence. So he was just, he was literally tried in sort of 30 seconds and found guilty because, there was no defence offered, basically. That was it. So he's now finally, when there's 3 murders that he's been convicted of, he finally gets a whole life tariff. Finally. But, before that, he didn't. So I say he died last year, but he served all his he was never going to come out of prison, and he was in prison in Edinburgh. Now I want to talk as well about I just want to tell you, the other reason that they think there are lots more victims is they did find a lot of jewellery items around his house and things like that. So in this investigation, this Operation Anagram, they found lots of what you might think are trophies. There are definitely other victims. Whether they'll ever, well, they probably won't ever find them now, unfortunately. Right, there was something else I wanted to tell you about him. Yeah, so I wanted to tell you about Cheryl McLachlan, and she was a girl. This was in 2005, and he'd only been released a couple of months earlier for the not the murder, but for the assault on those two 14-year-old girls. Well, of course, she didn't know this, and she'd got to know him through her boyfriend. He was just like an acquaintance of her boyfriend. And one day he asked her if she wanted to watch the football with him, because she liked football, he liked football. And he invited her into his flat, and did he want to come and watch the football? And she said exactly the same as everybody had said. She just thought he was a nice old guy, just like, she was only, I don't know that I've written down her age, but she was only a teenager. So to her, he would have just seemed really old, wouldn't he? And just, some kindly guy, like old guy who's just like a granddad or whatever. Oh, yeah, she said he seemed like a nice old guy. Goodness me. Anyway, they were in the house to watch the football. Then as soon as she said she had to go, that's when he went for her with a knife, went for her throat with a knife. And luckily for her, because she was only little, but she'd been in the army, she grew up with 8 brothers, she was tough, like she wasn't like a little shrinking violet, luckily for her. So she fought him off, and she cut her hand, because first thing you do with a knife, wouldn't it, you go to hold it. So it did gash her hand. But she did manage to fight him off, and she went to the hospital and got treated, but nothing ever came of that. I don't know why nothing ever came of that. Oh, she said that he feigned a heart attack. When he realised that she was going to get away, he pretended he was having a heart attack. That's his trademark thing that he does whenever he's being a twat, really. He just pretends he's having a heart attack. And she said she got out there and she ran like Forrest Gump. That's what she said, because there's an interview of hers on YouTube as well. Now, unfortunately, it's not really a happy ending to that story, because although she did escape from him, it just has affected her, and I don't know where she is now. The sort of interview I saw with her, it wasn't a current one. It might have been 10 years ago. So I just hope she's okay, because she started drinking to escape all the memories. She just couldn't cope with it. The PTSD, isn't it, that they call it, etc. And she started drinking. She had to give up her baby. She had a baby, but she had to give it up because social services intervened, because the drinking and drugs took over, etc. And she was begging on the streets, etc. And sorry, I don't know what I'll be crying in a minute, because I just think, God, how awful, to go through that. Well, where's the backup for people who go? Surely she must have got some victims compensation, or I don't know, because I don't know the full thing, but it's just so sad that she'd gone through that and escaped this guy, and then her life. Hi, Jill. Her life. Yeah, Chumba saying that's something I'm going to mention in a minute, Chumba, that he could be this Bible John. Anyway, so that was the story of the one that got away, Cheryl, but unfortunately she didn't, it wasn't a happy ending. I hope she's okay now. I hope that she is, it did end up being a happy ending. I hope she is sort of, reunited with her baby, etc. But Oh, and one thing she added as well, that as she escaped from the house, she saw a tie and a belt stuffed down the side of the chair. So it seems like he was planning to tie her up as well. So she really did have a lucky escape, actually. Oh, and he pretended it was a joke as well. He said, oh, it was just a joke. Then he pretended he had a heart attack. And it was her. That was when he changed his name to Pat McLaughlin. That's probably why he was never, and he that's probably why he was never caught for it. And she saw him on the TV as well. So I want to go what Chumba mentioned there, to talk about Bible John. I don't know if any of you know about Bible John, but he was a guy who killed who they think killed 3 women: Pat Docker, Jemima MacDonald, and Helen Puttock, between 1968 and 1969. And he picked them up at the Barrowland Ballroom, which I think is in Glasgow. Jumbo will tell me that, because I'm not sure exactly where it is. Hang on, I've just got to get that on. And the reason that there's always been thoughts that it might be him is because, well, for a start, he met his first wife in the ballroom. He did frequent this ballroom, so it's possible. But they've not been able to link him to it. He looks a bit like there's like an e-fit of Bible John that you can see on the internet and that, and it does look like a young Tobin. I won't be surprised if it's him, because it seems funny to me that this Bible John person, why did he stop? He only did 3 within those, and it's funny that why did he stop? Maybe he didn't stop because maybe he is Peter Tobin. So maybe we'll find out one day. I don't know. Again, it might be one of those eternal mysteries, But during his life, this is how he evaded being caught so much. He had 31 names, 49 addresses. Over the time, he just kept changing his name. He changed his address 49 times, and he went through 140 different cars. So that's basically all. He had connections all over the UK, and he lived this sort of nomadic existence, where he stayed at churches or in homeless shelters, etc. So so they linked him to, well, apart from the fact he was buried in his garden, which is a big clue, isn't it? The other way they linked him to Vicki Hamilton was DNA. They found a knife in his attic, and it had her DNA on it. Now, something that I want to read out. Now, I can't go through every single possible other victim of Peter Tobin, because there's just so many of them, but I would like to just read out the names. They may not be his victims, but these are other ones that they were taken that were possibly his victims. And I just want to read their names out, because I just want to say their names, because too often the victims get forgotten, don't they? And all the concentration is on the killer. But so other possible victims of Peter Tobin are Jessie Earl. Maybe one day I'll do a bit of a video on the actual backgrounds and that. And anyway, Louise Kay, April Fab, Dorothy Meachan, an unknown lady who they think was possibly a sex worker called the Duchess, who disappeared, just a body that was found. Pamela Exall, Yvette Watson, Elizabeth McCabe. Now, the 9th one on here is Patsy Morris, which she may be Levi Belfield's victim, because she was the girl who was she was only 14, I think, or 15, and she was his childhood sweetheart. So she's also linked possibly to the Levi Belfield serial killer. But it has been it is possible that it was Peter Tobin as well. So, God, how many of these people are there out there? Anyway, then number 10, Pamela Hasty. 11, Janice Weston. 12, Nicola Payne. 13, Helen Gorn. I think that looks like, oh, my writing's terrible. And 14, Jennifer Keeley. So that's 14 other poor souls that are possible. Well, they're victims of someone. You know, at the end of the day, they're victims of someone. Maybe not. What's David Matheson saying? Surely you've heard of the Glasgow Barras? No. What are the Barras? Tell me what are the bars? I don't know. No, I don't know. I've been to Glasgow. I love Glasgow. I love Scotland just generally. I've been to Glasgow and Edinburgh and St Andrews. But yeah, so that's, 14 women, 14, not only those 14 women, but 14 families that have not had any answers. And that's just 14, if you like. There'll be loads more. But anyway, very sad, very sad. So that's the story of Peter Tobin. Did you know about him, or, did you know anything about him before? He's just one of the worst, isn't he? I think the worst thing is, because although there's only 3 convictions, so they should, I don't know if this Operation Anagram is still in existence, but it was brought about, it's Anagram, obviously it's like a way of putting things together, isn't it? Because they realised he was active all over the UK, so he's not just confined to one area, so it was an active sort of an investigation involving all the different police forces. So, yeah. Okay, so that's him. So, it's not very cheerful, these serial killer Sundays, are they? But you know what? We need to know these victims. They do need to be highlighted, I think, these people. He's served his time now and he's gone from this world, and thank God for that. Let's hope he's serving his time in the other world. But let's just hope so. But for the families of the people, to me, it's the families, isn't it? Because obviously, well, it's the girls themselves, but they've gone to a better place. Let's hope so. The families have to live with it. And I think worse at these families as well, that don't have answers. They just know their child is or wife or sister or mum or whatever is gone, but they don't know what happened to them. So yeah. Okay, so as I say, later on there'll be a video coming out about Emma White, just looking back over a couple of her interviews. I'm just going to do a few little short interviews now coming up to the inquest, which still feels such a long way away, but it's actually not now, is it? So it's 5 weeks and counting. And let's see what happens at the inquest, if we get any answers whatsoever. Let's hope we do. I've got some in a couple of weeks, I've got some quite exciting news to tell you, but anyway, I keep sort of hinting at it, but I will tell you. And I will, Rachel, I will see you real soon in the next video. As always, remember to always live and love very carefully. And do you know, the trouble with these cases, sometimes you think, who can you trust? So you've got this nice friendly old guy, or so he seemed, and so you've got to be careful of not being suspicious of everybody, because sometimes you do, but I would say just follow your gut instinct. You've always got to, if you've got an instinct about someone, you're probably right. So, Mia, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. The Barrowlands. Is that discotheque, the ballroom, the Barrow Ballroom. Yeah, I know, I've seen it because of investigating cases and things, but anyway, maybe we'll talk about that another time. So remember to always live and love very carefully. Take care. And until I see you again, I hope that your God always goes with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.